Today I'll just be explaining how fishing works. So I know a lot of people are into fishing. Um, Personally, I fished for longer than some people have been alive. I know that makes me sound old, but I'm not that old. So let's start with something I consider no-skill fishing. So basically, no-skill fishing is where you have bobber on, and of course sometimes bobber fishing is different, but usually you just have your rod, um, your reel, and your line. But when you're fishing, right, you're out on the lake, you have a bobber connected to the line. So now how a bobber works is basically it's just a hollow ball, right? The bobber can be anything as long as it's hollow, as long as it floats. So the line is connected to the bobber, and the line will also, at least part of the line will go under the water, and there's usually a hook attached to it, and that's what the fish bites. So you have like a worm or like some kind of power bait on here. That's what fish will bite. Now, this is the reason why this is no skill, and the reason why this is so boring is you have to wait for the fish to come. This is different from like other types of fishing where you have to actively cast and you're searching for the fish. No, here the fish is looking for you. So, yeah, that's why, in my opinion, it's kind of boring. Um, Now the second type of fishing is, I guess, it's a bit better. It's still similar to bobber fishing though, and this technique can be used to catch honestly anything, but mainly trout. Right? It's trout. Trout are boring fish unless they're wild, and basically, this type of fishing is where you have a weight attached to the end of your line, and so you have like a egg. I think this is called the egg sinker weight. It looks something like that. And you will usually have some kind of a swivel attached to here, which allows your line to go up in the water level and be more visible to the fish. Here you'll have some kind of a hook and some kind of like bait attached to the hook, and that's what the fish is biting. Again, you also have to wait for the line, but honestly, the reason why I think this is a bit more skilled is because the setup takes a bit more time and you actually know how to tie the knots. So there's another type, I guess. This is the type for people who have moved beyond the beginner level. People who are becoming intermediately advanced, or like, if you have like a intermediate skill level, or if you're decent at fishing, you usually use this setup unless you're going trout fishing. So basically you have your line, and there's nothing on the line, no bobbers, no weight or anything. You just have a lure, and is this lure is artificial. And so I've heard from some people, oh, artificial lures don't catch fish. That is cap. Okay, that is cap. I've caught more fish on artificial lures than I have caught real lures. So anytime someone says that and you are fishing, you should put on an artificial lure. And if you're at a lake that is not primarily a trout lake, I'd highly suggest proving them wrong, because it's incredibly funny. So there's several types of artificial lures that you should probably know about. You have the spoon, which generally looks something like this. You got a hole up here for the line to attach to, and you have some kind of a hole down here, and then you have some kind of ring, and the hook is attached to that. Now the hook can be a single point hook or a treble hook, and a treble hook is just a hook with 3 points. Now, generally speaking, all hooks are barbed. This is so that when you're catching the fish doesn't come off as easily, but sometimes the fish still comes off. Now, when you're fishing for salmon, you do have to get rid of the barb. So, and that's because the barb can hurt the fish. Now, the second type of lure is similar to the spoon in that it mimics a wounded minnow. Now, it depends on the size of your spoon too, but generally, Yeah. Second type of lure is called a spinner or a spinner bait. Both work. There's actually tons of lures. I'm not going to go over many of them in this video. So basically your spinner lure looks something like this. You have your blade here, you got your body here, and you got your hook here. Now, with the spinner, you generally always have a treble hook. Like, it's pretty rare to find a spinner with just one hook. And it's the same thing, except some spinners can imitate fish, but some spinners can also imitate bugs. And the reason for that is because this blade here, it'll actually rotate. Okay, it'll rotate in the water. It'll spin, and this spinning, there's usually like a shiny side of the blade. It'll expose that shiny side and keep that flashing going on, and that'll attract the fish. 'Cause fish, they like picking on weak things. They don't like to chase things. Fish are lazy. Another type of lure, well, I guess another class of lures, honestly, is topwater. And so topwater is for pretty advanced people. I mean, I've caught a couple lures on topwater, but that's because I'm not actually that good at fishing. So the first type, I guess, or pretty common type, is the popper. And so the popper looks something like this. And it's designed to imitate a tiny fish on the surface of the water. And basically what this does, you'll see this mouth here is a bit open, it's a bit curved. What this does is it'll push the water up. So it'll create like a bubble or like a splash on the surface of the water. The lure itself is generally hollow. Sometimes they'll put like tiny little lead weights in there just for casting distance, but the lure itself should float. And another type of topwater lure is the frog, which basically acts like a popper except for it doesn't really make the splash. The frog, I mean, it's good for throwing into reeds, because here the frog, it's kind of like this. You have a frog, it looks like a frog too sometimes. Sometimes you'll have like illustrations on the side to make it look more like a frog. I know right now it kind of looks like a mouse, but sometimes you will have like fake legs coming off. And sometimes you won't, but this is what my frog looks like. And you have a hook coming from the bottom to the top like this. And same on the other side too. I know this might also look like the head of a deer, but just please ignore the bad drawing, okay? So basically what the fish does is when the fish comes, it'll probably bite the frog from the rear. And what that does is the fish will go like this. And then the hooks, they will kind of pop into the fish's mouth. And that's how you hook up the fish. You can also miss a lot of hook sets on frogs. Hook sets on frogs are really hard. So after talking about these couple types of lures, you also have a very important lure. This has contributed a lot to my fish count. It's called the jig. Now what the jig is, you basically just have a lead head. I guess you have a hook connected to that head, and after that you have a body. This body is generally designed to imitate like a bug or some kind of, like maybe sometimes you can imitate a fish too. You can really attach any kind of body you want, but this is a bottom lure. Okay, it'll go on the bottom. And why it's called a jig is because you have to kind of like move your rod up and down. And this will cause this lure to go up for some time, and then you're supposed to open your bail and let some line drop so the lure goes back down. And this constant motion of going up and down will sometimes cause the fish to bite. And another type of lure, I know there's a lot of types of lures, you're gonna have to cope with me for this one, is the jerk bait. So this lure is kind of like a mid-water level lure. It's not really deep, not really top water. Basically what it is, it looks like a minnow. Okay, and basically it kind of looks like that. And what it does is it acts like a minnow through the water, and it jerkbaits usually have kind of like a bill in the front, and what this bill does is it pushes the water to the sides, and what this also can do to the lure is it makes it kind of wag in the water. So if you do have a jerkbait, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But basically, if this is the lure, it'll kind of go like in this kind of motion. And this last lure I'm going to cover is the crankbait. So the crankbait, very, very important lure. It's similar to the jerkbait in that it's not really deep water, not really shallow water, but some types of crankbaits have large bills. Well, usually most crankbaits have large bills. Some crankbaits don't, but just because your crankbait doesn't have a bill doesn't mean it's not going to work. So what this bill does is, again, it's like this. It helps push it, but most of these crankbaits are designed to, you'll see this has a pretty big head and a small body. And so crankbaits can be, shaped like anything, honestly. Honestly, any fishing lure can be shaped like anything. And basically what the crankbait does is it still makes that wagging motion, but it will dive a lot deeper than the jerkbait. Okay, so now that we've covered all these lures, let's go into how to actually fish. So, because I'm not that good at drawing, I'm gonna just draw a stick. Okay, this is your rod. Okay, and I'm gonna draw a lake. Okay, for example, you have a lake that kind of looks like this. And let's say there's rocks on this side. There's let's say there's bushes on this side, bushes on this side, and bushes over here. And then let's say you have a tree that's hanging over the water. So what you want to do is, if you're in this kind of lake, which some people are, most lakes are actually like this. I know this is a pretty small lake, but just try to keep that in mind for now. This is not drawn to scale at all. So generally, most lakes you have a dock, and the dock is a place where people fish. But the problem with the dock is sometimes there's way too many people, and the fish. There's a concept in biology. It's called natural selection. All the fish that get caught die. So the fish that don't caught, the fish that can differentiate between fake lures and what's real, they survive. So that's kind of what happens around the dock areas. And some docks where less people come, the fish are a lot more willing to bite. But really, if you're standing on the dock, let's say this is you, okay? So let's say this is your fishing rod. And what you want to do is you want to cast either, so if you're going to throw into the rock area, you want a crankbait or a jig. And the reason for that is, if there's rocks on shore, there's probably going to be some kind of rocky structure underneath the shore. Remember, when people say there's 70% of the earth is covered in water, well, there's more land under the water, right? So, that's one part. But if you think, it also honestly just depends on what kind of fish you're targeting. But if you want to go for bass, the rocks would work for sure. And the vegetated area over here would also work. If you are good enough, you can actually skip your lure across the water. I recommend doing this with like a larger or longer lure that's also decently light. Lure with good surface area works pretty well for skipping. So if you can skip under the branches, you'll probably catch something. So, okay, that's just an analysis of what you should do. If you don't know how to cast, you probably shouldn't be watching this video. You should. I can think of at least 10 other videos that teach casting better than I could. So, after explaining strategy, we gotta look at what you're going for. Okay, you're going for the fish. Well, a fish kind of looks like this. I'm gonna draw a trout because I catch those sometimes. I mean, they don't fight very hard, so they're not extremely fun to catch. But yeah, if there's fish, there's fish. Okay, so I know, please excuse the bad drawing, but this is kind of more or less what a trout looks like. So basically, you have a nostril over here. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the nostril is for, because fish do have gills, but I'm assuming it does have some kind of a function. And now over here, you obviously have to have the eye. And most fish actually have something called a gill covering. The scientific term for that is the operculum, which is spelled Operculum. And basically what that does is it protects the gills. And so your gills, put that in red because that's what most fish's gills look like. It's like that. And actually, I'm gonna pretend that this fish is cut open, so the side is just non-existent. And so let's say you're cutting from here, and you're going back here. So we're gonna take a look at what the fish, I guess the anatomy of the fish, because this is also somewhat important for knowing where the fish is, right? So the fish's brain is actually quite small. It kind of looks like this, I know this isn't incredibly accurate, but it's close enough. Okay, so this structure here, this is the brain. This structure here, or I guess, yeah, this long structure here, this is the spinal cord. Now, if you want to ethically kill a fish, you should probably stun it first, but after stunning it, you should probably cut the spinal cord. That'll give it a quick death. And so, in addition to that, you've got the gills, right? So, oh my god. Let me do that in a different color. See, yeah. So the gills actually take up quite some space in the fish. So this is the gills, and under the gills you have the heart. So the fish's heart is also kind of small. Generally, most fish that live in lakes with large predators are used to fast movements, so their heart probably beats pretty quickly. They just probably don't have extremely high endurance. If you have a fish in a lake with less predators, they'll be evolved for more streamlined swimming. People did an experiment with, I think, killifish, and some fish that were in ponds that had predators swam faster but in shorter bursts than those that didn't. Okay, so the stomach is over here. Honestly, you can probably skip ahead in the video at this point. This video is going to be pretty long. This is obviously your intestine. The intestines are actually massive for any animal, not just the human. Okay, and I'll have to make the intestines go back in here. But alrighty, and the fish's liver is like somewhere over here-ish. So, I mean, it honestly depends on what part of the fish you want. Generally, people don't eat the internal organs. You generally want to take the internal organs out. And I don't usually eat the fish I catch because I don't, first of all, I don't really like eating fish. Like, the only type of fish I honestly like is salmon, but yeah. One of the most important things that I haven't yet drawn in the fish is the swim bladder. So, this swim bladder will help control where the fish is in the water level. So, and this stuff will all come back later when we're talking about the behavior of the fish in the water. So, you have your kidney. Your kidney of a fish is actually surprisingly long, but then again, it's like, right? And I guess in the bottom you have the fish's bladder. And now on most fish, you have something called the lateral line, which is kind of just like a line that runs down the side of the fish. And in most fish, this isn't just an imaginary line. In some fish, it's actually visible. And, oops, I forgot to draw something. The eggs of the fish. Some people like eating fish eggs, I guess, and fish eggs are, I guess, used in sushi. So, yeah, they're located about there. And so, this is, I guess, the inside of the fish. Now, if we don't have to worry about the inside of the fish, we now talk about the outside of the fish. So, so up here you have something called a dorsal fin. This is very key for controlling movement in the water. And I mean, some fish with like fins that aren't that good can also get caught pretty easily because they can't swim as well and they're more stationary. I mean, more stationary fish can also be hard to catch though. And you have a fin down here. This is called the pelvic fin. This part's going to be pretty boring, honestly. So if you want to just skip ahead, I won't really mind. This part is called the anal fin. And so here in trout and salmon, or anything in the salmon family, usually has an adipose fin. Now, wild fish, this part here is really key for telling if the fish is wild or not. Wild trout will have an adipose fin attached. However, farmed trout will not. Right, farmed and stock trout will not have an adipose fin. It's usually cut off and it doesn't regrow. So, the limits, at least in Washington State, that's the state where I live, it's, I believe, 5 for wild trout, like brook trout, and 2 for stock trout, like 2 rainbow trout and 2 brown trout. Yeah. And so fish are kind of interesting, and that depends on what you're fishing too. If you are fishing in a lake, so I'm just gonna pretend that this is a lake. Okay, so this is the bottom. Some fish will hang up more towards the surface, some fish will hang up more towards the bottom. And so just for example, let's say you have like a rocky, I guess, drop off here. Always fish drop offs. This is a tip that is crucial if you want to catch a lot of fish. If you're on a boat, fish drop offs. Even if you're by the shore, if you can have access to some kind of a drop off, always fish them. Now, you won't always be able to know if there's a drop off or not. It's really just like the more often you fish there, the better you know the area, and so you know things a bit better. And basically, here you if your lure is over here in the rocks, you can catch a decent amount of fish. I generally like throwing a jig into the rocks. You can get caught, but you know that chance of that happening is not extremely high. You could also throw a crankbait. Of course, you can also get caught. The chance of that is a bit higher, but not extremely high. And the rocks, you usually don't get caught on the rocks because you know they're rocks, right? But sometimes it still happens. Now, fishing in the rocks, okay, what you want to do is you want to present your lure as something that might be trying to like dart into the rocks. Maybe you're darting around the rocks or something, but sometimes that'll entice a bass to bite. And so there's generally you'll find panfish, all sorts of panfish on the rocks. Sometimes catfish, occasionally a walleye. But usually panfish, and panfish includes sunfish, pumpkin seed, etc., etc. Also includes bass and smallmouth bass. And there's a couple types of bass, but they all count as panfish. So if you're fishing the deeper zones, there's usually not like sand, just sand at the bottom. You know, you have weeds. If you have carp, it'll get rid of the weeds. It'll make the water muddy. It'll make it harder to see, and so that's why no one likes carp. That's also why carp are invasive species. They take down the grass, and nothing has anything else to eat, and then species just start dying. So if you're fishing the reeds, okay, if you're fishing the weeds, the weeds, you could throw a jig, or I'd recommend pretty heavy line if you want to go into the weeds with this lure, but the spoon. So the spoon, you can throw a spoon, I guess, in here. If you do get caught, since you have heavy line, you can just drag it out. And you could also throw a spinner, same thing, heavy line. Another thing that you could do is you could throw top water, depending on which state you're in. Top water will work. Some states top water just won't work. Well, okay, not state. I guess lake, right? Some lakes top water will work. Some states top water just won't work. It really does depend on which state you're in. Honestly, that's about it. You could also throw a Carolina Rigger. Now, I know I didn't really cover it, but that's the thing I was talking about earlier. But the thing that you use to catch trout, sometimes you just throw something in here, and it has an egg sinker attached, and you've got a swivel here, and your bait is hanging somewhere up here in the water column. Now, this setup is really good for deep lakes. If you're just there to catch a fish, it's good for deep lakes. Your leader, you want your leader, at least during the spring and the summer, if you're going for trout, you want the leader to be about as long as your rod. Yeah, I know that's really long, but you'll definitely catch some fish. And what you want to put on that leader, what you want to put on that hook is power bait. Worms will work, or you could throw a rat tail. A rat tail is not an actual rat's tail. Okay, it's kind of like looks like a jig, but without the hook. It's kind of got like a body and kind of like a squiggly tail thing. This thing will catch a ton of trout. Okay, now of course it honestly depends on where you're fishing, but most of the things I've said so far will get you success. And so without so after talking about all that stuff, it can also be extremely useful to tell where the fish is in the lake. Now, sometimes fish make themselves really obvious by jumping, or sometimes it can be pretty subtle. So, you can, if a fish is near the surface, sometimes you'll be able to see it, okay? Okay, that's a terrible fish. There we go. Sometimes if the fish is near the surface, you'll be able to see it, and you'll be able to cast towards it. And I mean, I wouldn't really recommend casting towards the fish because fish will get scared of splashes, because splashes generally mean that there's a bird there, and birds eat fish. So the fish that aren't scared of splashes die, and the fish that are scared of splashes are left. So, you know, natural selection again. This fish thing. Okay. Fish move through the water by swimming, okay? And also, I hate to break it to you, but fish can't drown. Okay, if you see a fish dead in the water, it probably didn't drown. There's probably not enough oxygen in the water, not enough food or something. Maybe it's a carp, and carp die all the time. You know, so you know. What you want to do is you'll see some kind of ripple on the water. So if you pretend, if you pretend this is kind of like a window, okay, you'll see kind of like a wavy-ish structure forming, kind of like that. And it honestly varies depending on which way the fish is swimming. So let's put the tail in white. So if this is how the tail's going, you're going to be pushing water this way. And then the tail's going to go that way. Push water this way. And eventually it'll create kind of like a bubbly thing in the water. And this is for pretty big fish in generally untouched lakes. You can catch them there using this strategy. And honestly, that's about it I have today. Thank you for watching.